also located an operational headquarters with Hamas communications and military materials.
These weapons have absolutely no business being inside a hospital. The only reason they're here is because Hamas put them here, because they use this place, like many other hospitals and ambulances and sensitive facilities inside the Gaza Strip, for their illicit military purposes. So there's Kalashnikov rifles here, even ammunition.
In a video posted on social media, the Israeli military gave viewers a closer look at how Hamas terrorists hid their military gear among medical equipment.
In military terms, this is a grab bag, grab and go of a Hamas combatant. And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you will be able to see is military equipment. There is an AK-47, there are cartridges, ammo, there are grenades in here, of course uniforms, and all of this was hidden very conveniently, secretly behind the MRI machine.
In another post on social media, Israeli Defense Forces confirmed they have successfully delivered incubators, baby food, and medical supplies to Al-Shifa Hospital. The military added their medical team and Arabic-speaking soldiers are on the ground to ensure that these supplies reach those in need. Palestinian authorities proposed a supervised evacuation of the hospital on Tuesday. Hundreds of patients remain in the hospital, including dozens of premature babies. The Hamas-backed Gaza Health Ministry said 40 patients, including 3 babies, have died since the hospital's emergency generator ran out of fuel on Saturday. And in terms of fuel supplies in Gaza, Israeli defense officials early Wednesday let in some 6,300 gallons of fuel from Rafah crossing. Also, nearly 650 people, mostly dual nationals, were allowed into Egypt. The fuel is the first delivery allowed in since Hamas killed 1,200 Israelis and took some 200 hostages. Israel previously said it won't allow supplies in until the hostages are freed. The fuel will only be used for the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. And staying in the Middle East, the U.S. Navy said its warship shot down a drone in the Red Sea launched from Yemen. This appeared to be only the second time the U.S. has brought down projectiles near its warship since the Israeli-Hamas war began. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Who came back with thousands of pages of documents and evidence. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the report.
City officials in Reedley found around 1,000 transgenic mice, dangerous chemicals, and thousands of vials with biological substances in them at the illegal California Biolab last year. Biolab workers said the mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus. After 9 months of city officials sounding the alarm, the FBI declined to investigate and the CDC refused to act. City officials turned to their local representative, Congressman Jim Costa, for help. Costa told NTD there's some lessons to be learned from the example.
We see how easy to transport infectious diseases around the world is.
Costa says he thinks the U.S. is very conscious of the challenges of COVID and concerned about how it's spread.
And so when they talk about cooperation, clearly business people attempting to bring money from offshore to invest in private labs that particularly could compromise public safety is something that should never, ever be allowed.
The Democratic congressman says he's on board to get legislation and protocols in place to provide protection. After Costa convinced the CDC to visit the unlicensed lab, they identified, based on labeling alone, at least 20 potentially infectious agents, including the coronavirus, HIV, malaria, hepatitis, and herpes. But according to the report, the CDC refused to test samples after repeated requests, even when the city offered to pay for it. Chairman of the Select Committee on the CCP, Mike Gallagher, says there needs to be some appropriate tripwires in place. The report says city officials found a freezer labeled Ebola that the CDC did not, with sealed bags inside. The deadly disease has a 25 to 90% lethality rate. When asked by email, the CDC said the bags did not merit testing unless labeled Ebola themselves. The Public Health Agency concluded there was no evidence of select agents or toxins and had a court order state and local authorities to destroy all materials. Democratic ranking member Raja Krishnamurthy says he's glad the report has established some facts, but that more tools are needed to stop it from happening in the first place. and that currently anybody, including fugitives, fraudsters, and terrorists, can buy dangerous pathogens online with little vetting.
You need an identification, a driver's license to get Sudafed in any local pharmacy, but you don't need even that to get Ebola online.
The investigation revealed connections between the lab's owner and the CCP that include an ongoing criminal enterprise and large unexplained money transfers from Chinese bank accounts.
The individual in question was a criminal with a long criminal record with dubious ties to the PRC. This was a massive problem, and we're hoping this will spur productive legislative action going forward to prevent this from happening again.
The lab owner, Jiabei Jesse Zhu, was hit with a $330 million Canadian court judgment for IP theft in 2016. The fugitive was a former corporate officer in the CCP's military civil fusion organization. The committee established the companies that set up the lab are tied to Chinese companies and nationals. Congressman Gallagher says he hopes future hearings will produce a bipartisan agenda for steps Congress can take to prevent anything like the Reed Biolab from happening again. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Tonight, that was during a demonstration for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. The DNC headquarters had to be evacuated.
Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman says the protesters were violent and attacked police with pepper spray. The representative said, quote, pro-terrorist protesters attacked police and tried breaking into the building. He also thanked police who stopped them and for helping him. About 7 members of Congress were reportedly inside the building when the attack took place.
Meanwhile, Democratic Congressman Sean Casten compared the incident to the January 6th Capitol breach. He questioned the protesters' intents, saying protests have to take place within reasonable boundaries.
And just in, a pro-Palestinian protester has been charged in the death of Jewish man Paul Kessler. That was during a demonstration in California.
Witnesses said the man tried to bait Kessler and struck him with a megaphone, causing him to fall and fatally injure his head. He's charged with involuntary manslaughter. The suspect is a full-time computer science professor. He's held on $1 million bail.
One of President Biden's judiciary nominees had a hard time at her nomination hearing in the Senate. Sarah Hill struggled to define basic legal terms during an exchange with Senator John Kennedy on Wednesday.
What is the difference between a stay order and an injunction?
A stay order would prohibit, an injunction would restrain the parties from taking action. A stay order, I'm not sure that I actually can give you the...
Biden nominated Hill to be the U.S. District Judge for the Northern District of Oklahoma. She's a former Cherokee Nation's Attorney General with 20 years of law practice.
A stay order and an injunction order are two terms federal judges regularly use. An injunction bars a party from doing something as the case continues, and a stay stops the legal proceedings of a case in court.
Hill also struggled with other questions, such as the definitions of collateral estoppel and multi-district litigation statute.
Kennedy, who also comes from a legal background, has a practice of questioning judiciary nominees on basic legal terms and definitions. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia says he won't rule out leaving the Democratic Party as he weighs a potential presidential run. Here's the senator during an interview with CNN.
I've never considered myself a Washington Democrat. I've been a very independent person. You have a D or an R by your name or an I by your name. It shouldn't identify who you are. I vote independently, and I've always done that for 40 years. So, we'll see.
Manchin announced last week he will not seek another term in the deeply red state. It came as a blow for Democrats hoping to hold on to a narrow 51 to 49 majority in the Senate.
In July, he stoked speculation of a third-party presidential campaign during remarks at a forum held by a centrist group at a college in New Hampshire.
Now to the impeachment inquiry into President Biden. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he fully supports the investigation. This after he received an update on the situation yesterday. Speaker Johnson told The Hill the investigation will now move to the next step, saying, quote, now the appropriate step is to place key witnesses under oath and question them under the penalty of perjury to fill gaps in the record.
Johnson says the investigation has shown that then Vice President Biden acted inappropriately. That's regarding business dealings with his family. Earlier this month, fresh allegations surfaced that Biden was involved in a pay-to-play bribery scheme.
The inquiry began under former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Johnson's stance was not exactly clear until now. In Colorado, closing arguments wrapped up yesterday in former President Trump's disqualification trial. This comes after lawyers argued that Trump is ineligible for office and should be removed from the state's 2024 ballot. The lawsuit uses the insurrection argument to bar Trump from the ballot. Ratified after the Civil War, the insurrection ban says American officials who take an oath to support the Constitution are banned from future office if they engaged in insurrection. But it does not define insurrection, nor does it spell out how to enforce the ban. Trump beat similar cases in New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Michigan, but the landscape might be different in Colorado, as the other cases were dismissed before reaching trial. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. The judge's ruling is expected today or tomorrow.
The video statements were leaked by attorney Jonathan Miller, who's representing defendant Misty Hampton. Judge Scott McAfee is expected to issue a protective order this morning.
I don't know
News
why.
outlets, including ABC and CNN, obtained the video statements by Scott Hall, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Cheeseborough, and Jenna Ellis. They were submitted to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office as part of their plea bargains.
The prosecutors filed an emergency motion for a protective order after the leaks, prompting a hearing. The judge was concerned that the proposed order would result in a long series of hearings to establish what material is sensitive or not sensitive.
The protective order would keep most of the information unavailable to the public. However, one attorney suggested that the order is unnecessary as most material is publicly available. Ivy League universities received 45 2018, 10 elite universities have received roughly $33 billion in federal contracts and grants. That's more than the total undergraduate student tuition paid to these institutions during the same period. The report further highlights an additional $12 billion in special tax treatment. The nonprofit found that 5 Ivy League colleges reportedly took more than $220 million in pandemic relief. The report also examined specific grants allocated to these institutions. Cornell spent more than $4 million to increase the number of minority faculty in the biological sciences. Columbia University received $5.7 million for a climate alternative reality game.
$1 billion of fake goods busted. It's the largest seizure of counterfeit goods in U.S. history. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York found over 200,000 items. The goods include bags, clothes, shoes, and other luxury products. 2 people have been arrested. Officials say they ran the operation out of a Manhattan storage facility from January to October.
The suspects have been charged with trafficking in counterfeit goods. They could face up to 10 years in prison if convicted.
For torching cement trucks in Gwinnett County. And investigators say that's not the only suspicious fire this week. But we begin tonight in Cobb County, where gunfire shut down South Cobb Drive for hours during the evening commute. More than a dozen shots fired during a shooting involving police. Good evening, I'm Russ Spencer.
I'm Courtney Bryant. 1 person is dead. Law enforcement says it happened after an attempted traffic stop. Fox 5's Denise Dillon is live in Cobb County. And Denise, you've been talking to police and witnesses. What are they saying tonight?
Yeah, well, police told me that they could not release many details because the GBI has taken over this investigation. And agents are out here now. It is difficult to see, but those agents are surrounding a black truck just across the street, kind of in that wood line there. You can also see that a section of South Cobb Drive between Windy Hill and Benson Pool is shut down. It has been this way for hours. One witness told me she heard more than 20 gunshots.
Get down, y'all.
Shots fired across a busy Cobb County road during rush hour traffic.
Put your head down. Put your head down.
A section of South Cobb Drive was shut down for several hours. Law enforcement says it all started around 5:30 when the Marietta Cobb Smyrna Task Force tried to pull over a car.
There was an endeavor to escape after the traffic stop.
The F-150 pickup tried to make a U-turn to, I guess, elude the police. And so one of the officers used a pit maneuver move and drove the F-150 pickup truck into the woods.
Victoria Chapman and her family were on South Cobb Drive when it was all going down.
As we seen the vehicle launch into the woods with the cop car alongside it, we heard gunshots just erupting from, we couldn't even tell where they were coming from, just everywhere.
During that encounter, that traffic stop, shots were fired. The individual inside the vehicle is now deceased.
No law enforcement officers were injured during the shooting.
We extend our condolences to the family and the friends and those affected by the shooting. We ask for your thoughts and prayers for our officers who face a very dangerous job. We're thankful that no other people were hurt.
Now, police would not give details about the person in the truck who was shot. They did say that this traffic stop was part of a drug investigation, and we have seen DEA agents out here along with GBI and law enforcement from Cobb County. Again, no officers were injured in this shooting. Reporting live in Cobb County, Denise Dillon, Fox 5 News.
Well, as you say, still a lot of unanswered questions. Denise, thanks very much. New at 10 tonight.
In the United States and the CCP today. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao in San Francisco, where that meeting took place. Iris, tell us, what do we know about President Biden's message thus far?
To you, Steve. So in a very short while, President Biden will hold a solo press conference right here at a Familia Estate right here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is exactly where the U.S. meeting with CCP officials was taking place earlier today. And the White House told us this morning that President Biden will no doubt bring up human rights issues with China candidly. And President Biden said during the meeting this morning that he's trying to responsibly manage the competition between U.S. and China so that it does not veer into conflict. However, he also said this on Tuesday. Watch.
To get back on a normal course of corresponding, being able to pick up a phone and talk to one another is a crisis. But I'm not going to continue to sustain the support for positions where if we want to invest in China, we have to turn over all our trade secrets.
And today's meeting also comes as concerns are mounting over China's aggression, especially after the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon earlier this year. And of course, as the FBI Director Christopher Wray has been warning about a rise in Chinese espionage activities. And while the U.S. is trying to maintain and perhaps improve its relationship with China, the U.S.-China Security and Economic Commission today published a report saying that actually there's been doubts about U.S.-China diplomacy as China has been using its influence around the world trying to manipulate political and economic activities in different countries. It adds that China has been only getting more aggressive and its approach has been even more sophisticated. Meanwhile, a senior Biden administration official also told me last night that a very concerning feature of Chinese diplomacy is its economic coercion toward other countries. He says that U.S. allies and the U.S. need to work together to counter that. And meanwhile, Republicans have been calling on the Biden administration to be tougher on China. Here's Mitch McConnell on the floor today. Watch.
The Biden administration has too often met this historic moment with weakness and naivete. Time and time again, it has sacrificed competition on the altar of green climate policy.
And thus, as Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis published an op-ed on China on the New York Post on Tuesday. He says that both parties of the U.S. are mistakenly treating China as a friendly competitor, while in fact, he says, is a hostile Marxist regime that if we allow them to continue doing what they're doing, it's going to exploit our openness and steal more of our technology. Back to you.
And talking about the impact on climate, pollution, and the future of the planet, it's critically important. We're also looking for a different climate change, and that's a change in the nefarious approach of the current regime, the Chinese Communist Party, and its assault on religious groups and minorities, obviously starting with the Uyghurs, who are suffering the most, but you also, of course, have the Tibetans And I can recall just a few years ago when I was in Jerusalem at an international gathering of Christians and Jews that 3,000 Chinese Christians came to Jerusalem for that event. I don't think 3 of them could come today. You have the forced closure, you have sometimes the destruction of churches, you have a pressure on the content of sermons.
Days after a massive fire erupted under the 10 freeway near Alameda and 14th Street in downtown Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom announced Tuesday that the I-10 will no longer need to be demolished or replaced and gave an estimated reopening timeline of 3 to 5 weeks. Officials urge commuters to utilize public transportation, work remotely, and explore alternative routes to bypass closures around the I-10. Mayor Karen Bass recently revealed plans to expedite the E-Line trains running along the 10 freeway. Bass shared on her X account Wednesday, took Metro Los Angeles to work this morning to beat the traffic. It's the best way to beat the traffic downtown as we work urgently to get the 10 repaired. The LA Department of Transportation announced Tuesday night that all commuter express buses would be free for the rest of the year. Christina Corona, NTD News, Los Angeles.
Was stacked with flammable materials. The lot was leased by the state through a little-known program called Airspace and Telecommunications Licensing, which is now under scrutiny. According to the Transportation Department's website, the program allows the state to lease empty spaces under roads to businesses to bring in money for large transportation projects. But Governor Gavin Newsom said the state would now reassess this program. Details of that program remain opaque. Newsom's office directed questions about whether the state has any regular inspection protocols to state transportation officials. Newsom added that crews are now working around the clock to repair the I-10 freeway, and it could take between 3 to 5 weeks.
And he's a published author and also a father of 2. Elmer Stevens, he also frequents Lahaina. He's a father of 2, and he does find solace in the quiet pleasures of life.
The 4th still missing is Lydia Coloma.
Lydia is a Lahaina resident. She is a mother, a wife, a well-respected community member.
According to Honolulu Civil Beat, an astounding 8 of Coloma's family members lost their lives in the Lahaina fire. This week, officers Taylor and Lancidel started new burn zone searches.
Steve and I are still going out into the rubble, into the burn zone. We'll find new information out, and we want to get the rest of those people.
Officer Taylor told us he knew some of the victims.
One of the unfortunate ways I found out was we would get the DNA confirmation sheets, and I was reading through it so I could find out who it was, and I read the name, and it was from a former coworker. She used to work at the police department, and when I started my career, I worked closely with her.
And Officer Lancidel was already changed, deeply affected by devastating wildfires.
My hometown is Paradise, California. I had families and friends in Paradise that lost their homes and everything.
For now, it's been 100 days of work. Both officers remain hopeful there will be answers and eventual solace for the families of the 4 who are still missing.
Do you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? This is a term that he used earlier this year.
Well, look, he is. I mean, he's a dictator in the sense that he is the guy who runs a country that is a communist country that is based on a form of government totally different than ours.
He also says that he brought up human rights issues, China's wrong detainment of U.S. citizens, as well as China's aggressive behaviors in the South China Sea.
And as I always do, I raised areas where the United States has concerns about the PRC's actions, including detained and exit banned U.S. citizens, human rights, and coercive activities in the South China Sea.
Biden also says that the U.S. rejects China's non-market practices, and thus a senior Biden administration official told me that the U.S. is concerned over China's economic coercion toward U.S. allies such as Japan and South Korea. The two sides also agreed to resume military-to-military communications, which were cut off amid tensions. But China's aggression is still at the center of the spotlight, as the FBI have been warning about a rise in Chinese spy activities here in the U.S., and as there's been some 200 incidents of China's aggressive military actions
where PLA operators have performed reckless maneuvers or discharged chaff or shot off flares or approached too rapidly or too close to U.S. aircraft.
And thus, as Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis warning in a recent op-ed that both parties in the U.S. have been treating the CCP like a friendly competitor, while in fact it's a hostile Marxist regime that will only continue to steal U.S. technology if the U.S. doesn't act strongly against it. Reporting in San Francisco, Iris Tao, NTD News.
What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many, many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not have. There was a big question of what did the people do who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is.
Decisively defeat Hamas and make sure that this brutal terrorist regime can never rise again.
The brutal reality of Hamas cannot be diminished. They murder babies. They rape women. They abuse the elderly. They killed 30 of our fellow Americans, hundreds of our Israeli friends, and are currently, right now, holding 200 innocent men, women, and children hostage. How anyone in America could sympathize with these terrorists is truly unfathomable.
How we are living is hard to describe to you. We hostage families have lived the last 39 days in slow motion torment. These children of God range in age from 9 months to 87 years. They are Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and Hindu. Why are they being left underground in the dirt?
The thousands of people who gathered.
The Communist Party will violate that commitment.
There are no plans for another visit between Biden and Xi at this time, but they're keeping the door open. In San Francisco, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Of Adam Johnson, who had passed away from taking a skate blade to the neck in the middle of a game. Johnson was playing for the Nottingham Panthers against the Sheffield Steelers on October 28. At one point, Steelers player Matt Petgrave came in with a reverse hit when, as he was falling, his skate reached up and hit Johnson, which led to the fatal injury. Johnson later passed away at a local hospital. The South Yorkshire Police said the suspect is currently released on bail as the investigation is ongoing. Police did not provide any details on the suspect they arrested. This past Sunday, the Steelers held a moment of silence for Johnson at their first home game back since his death.
86 votes. But in most cases, the vote tallies ranged from 55 to around 60% against the contract. Workers were awaiting total votes from a large assembly plant in Arlington, Texas, but many say they're expecting the contract to be voted down. Voting also continues at Ford, where the deal is passing with over 66% of votes in favor. Local union officials say longtime workers are unhappy they didn't get larger pay raises like newer workers and wanted a larger pension increase. Newer hires are looking for a defined benefit pension plan instead of the 401k defined contribution plan that they now receive.
Speaking of domestic violence, they have attacked the Capitol and the DNC headquarters in D.C. They've been going into buildings all over the country, the Capitol in Texas, New York, out in California, all kinds of stuff. Seattle, they're getting crazy and stupid. I mean, they're all backed by, it's all a socialist, Marxist. It's insane.
Decisively defeat Hamas and make sure that this brutal terrorist regime can never rise again.
The brutal reality of Hamas cannot be diminished. They murder babies. They rape women. They abuse the elderly. They killed 30 of our fellow Americans, hundreds of our Israeli friends, and are currently, right now, holding 200 innocent men, women, and children hostage. How anyone in America could sympathize with these terrorists is truly unfathomable.
How we are living is hard to describe to you. We hostage families have lived the last 39 days in slow motion torment. These children of God range in age from 9 months to 87 years. They are Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, and Hindu. Why are they being left underground in the dirt?
The thousands of people who gathered.
Kids, Tristan, Emma, Elon, and baby Lux. The family frequently shares snapshots of their life on Instagram. One of the videos shows the boys giving mom flowers after collecting them from the ground. This video received a lot of positive comments. The 33-year-old mom told at the Times that when the boys saw how their dad made their mom happy by doing chivalrous gestures, they began to copy him. They would open the door, carry the bags, or try to pay for mom with the coins they have. Arissa said that the best thing is that the boys also do kind things for their sister. She believes the father's role is very important in a family because dad teaches positivity and good things. It may seem as though for this couple, parenting is effortless, but Arissa said that it's a lot of work and patience. Sometimes she loses her cool, but would always say sorry to her kids for overreacting, so the kids would learn how to apologize. Arissa hopes that thoughtful, caring gestures are something her boys will also carry into their future families.
Retired Los Angeles officer, the city lost as many as 1,000 officers. Let's hear why.
Marlon Marache, a retired Los Angeles police officer, explains to California Insider C. Makarami why the LAPD is struggling to find new officers.
You are one incident away from being filed criminal charges. I mean, now you're talking about getting involved in the use of force or getting involved in a violent, critical incident, and there's just that possibility that not only are you might get disciplined for doing something wrong during this incident, but you're also looking possibly into criminal filing. So that kind of turns people off from applying.
Marache said 25 years ago, there were about 1,000 applicants per month to be a police officer, and the department would hire the best of the best from that lot. Now it's down to only a couple hundred.
George Floyd didn't help at all. I think the protests and what happened with the George Floyd incident it takes an impact as to, hey, I don't want to do that kind of work. I don't want to see myself getting in trouble and getting, possibly going to jail.
They don't want to go into service either.
People are very apprehensive to even apply to do this job. I can certainly tell you defunding, that movement of defunding the police, that certainly didn't help.
In addition, California's strict laws, like Senate Bill 2, makes the job harder.
If you do certain conduct, right? Certain things that you do while you're carrying out your essential job functions as a police officer, you could see yourself getting in trouble to the point where we're going to actually pull your license and decertify you. Not just so much decertify you and say, hey, we're going to revoke it, but also suspend you depending on the conduct.
Marache says there's the mental well-being and emotional aspect of being a police officer.
We're asking a lot out of an officer. We're asking you to be maybe that psychologist at scene. We're asking you to be that social worker at scene. We're asking you to solve everyone's problems. Within one radio call, you're seeing a dead body, and next thing you know, you just gotta kind of reassess or, rethink your emotions. Like time out, let me get my emotions back, and then go to another call and deal with someone that's with a domestic violence. Or from there, there's an officer needs help because they just got themselves involved in an OIS and an officer-involved shooting.
The upside is there are now more resources like therapy for police officers after a stressful shift. San Francisco is also seeing a shrinking police department. Earlier this year, another former officer told California Insider the soft on crime policies and anti-police attitude made policing more and more difficult.
An update on the case surrounding hockey player Adam Johnson.